You ever wonder why some people seem to earn so much money so fast, while others spend years just trying to earn a little and never break past survival? Why is it that making $10,000 a month feels like a struggle? But some people out there are making $100,000 or more, and they're not even working themselves to death? I used to think the answer was obvious. Maybe they're just smarter, or luckier, or maybe they had connections. But then I heard something that flipped my mindset. Myron Golden once said, "It's easier to make a lot of money in a short period of time than it is to make a small amount over a long period of time." At first I didn't get it. Easier? How? But the more I lived through this, the more I saw it was true. Making $10,000 per month feels hard. Because that kind of money comes from working harder, stretching longer, saying yes to anything just to survive. It's usually tied to time and effort, not value and impact. But when I started shifting how I think, when I focused on creating value, solving problems, building systems, suddenly 100,000 didn't seem so far. In fact, it required less effort, but more alignment, more clarity, more courage, more spiritual understanding of how wealth actually works. So today I want to talk to you about this shift, because the truth is, if you're stuck at 10K a month and grinding, you might be using the wrong system. And once you change the system, you change your income. The first thing I had to unlearn was this: time is money. Now, I know this sounds like a truth. It's what we're all taught growing up. Your teacher said it, your parents said it, even motivational speakers say it like it's wisdom. But let me tell you something that changed everything for me. Time is not money. Value is money. Because if you believe that time is money, you will always tie your income to how many hours you can work. And guess what? You only have 24 hours in a day. You sleep for 6 or 7. You eat. You commute. You rest. Maybe you take care of your family. So how many hours do you really have to make money? 4, 8, 10 hours? If your income is tied to your time, you're already capped. No matter how hard you work, you'll hit a ceiling. And that's the trap. That's why people working 10 hours a day, 6 days a week still can't break free. Because their mindset says, if I want more money, I need to work more hours. That is a formula for burnout, not wealth. So I had to drop that mindset. I had to look at time differently, because the truth is, time is not money. Time is time. And value creates money. Let me give you a simple example. If I sell something worth 1,000 pesos and it takes me 5 hours to do that, that's 200 pesos per hour. But if I build something that solves a real problem and people are willing to pay 10,000 pesos for it, even if it took me 1 hour, the income doesn't come from the hour. It comes from the value I provided. That's the shift. And here's the dangerous part. When you believe time is money, you're more likely to think small. You say things like, how can I make 500 pesos today? Instead of asking, how can I create 50,000 worth of value this week? One question keeps you in survival. The other forces your mind to grow. I used to do jobs that paid by the hour, minimum wage, gig work, whatever I could find. But I was always tired and always broke. Because no matter how many hours I gave, it was never enough. Then something hit me. If I don't change the way I think, I will always trade time for money and die tired. So I began to ask a better question. What can I create that works even when I'm not working? That's when things started changing. I stopped selling my hours and started selling solutions. I learned how to sell online. I built systems. I recorded content that could reach people while I slept. I wrote messages that worked even if I wasn't talking live. And slowly, that 10K mindset broke off me. Because here's the secret nobody tells you. Making 100K is not about working 10x harder. It's about thinking 10x bigger. And let me be clear, this is not laziness. I still work. I still show up. But the work I do now is not about how much time I can give. It's about how much impact I can make. It's about how many people I can help, how much value I can stack, how much leverage I can build. Now, I want to bring in what Myron Golden taught that really confirmed this in my spirit. It's easier to make a lot of money in a short period of time than it is to make a small amount over a long period of time. That sounds backwards, right? But think about it. Making 10,000 a month usually requires you to keep doing the same thing every month just to survive. There's no margin. There's no freedom. You don't have time to think or build. But when you switch to building high-value assets, high-impact offers, high-leverage systems, you can make 100,000 in a week, a day, sometimes even in one sale. Because now you're not depending on time, you're depending on value. I had to train my brain to stop asking, how long will this take? And start asking, how much can this be worth to someone? Because that's the real question that moves you out of small money thinking. Let me be honest. Most people don't get this, not because they're lazy, but because they were never taught to think that way. They were trained by a system that glorifies hard work over smart work. But the world doesn't reward effort alone. The world rewards results. And results come from understanding value. So I started creating more than I consumed. Instead of just watching videos, I started making videos. Instead of just buying products, I started selling solutions. Instead of scrolling through ideas, I started testing my own. And that's when I realized 100K months are not only possible, they're actually easier when you stop dragging your time behind you like a heavy chain. Because when your income is tied to time, you are a prisoner. But when your income is tied to value, you are free. That's the first key. And it's the foundation for everything that came after. The second shift that changed everything for me was when I learned that not all value is equal. Now, this might sound obvious, but it's something I never really understood growing up. When people say, just create more value, what most of them mean is, work harder, add more hours, add more output, add more hustle. But what I discovered is that just creating more value can actually trap you in more work. What actually unlocks wealth is creating higher value. And that's a very different thing. I learned this from Myron Golden. He teaches something called the 4 levels of value. And when I understood this, it was like seeing the blueprint behind why the rich get richer, and why the rest stay stuck trying to work their way to freedom. Let me walk you through the 4 levels of value and how they show up in real life. 1. Implementation. This is the bottom level. This is the value of physical labor. It's tied to doing. It's the value of your time, your strength, your hands. If you're working as a cleaner, construction worker, delivery driver, or even a cashier, this is where you are. You're trading time for money. The value you bring is based on how much you can physically do. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with this level. It's honest, it's hard, and it's real. But here's the truth. Implementation is the lowest paid level. Not because you're not important, but because it's the most replaceable. If you don't show up, someone else can. If you're tired, the machine can take over. And because it's tied to time, you are limited by your energy and the hours in a day. That's why you see people working 2 jobs, 12-hour shifts, and still barely surviving. Because no matter how hard you work at this level, the ceiling is low. 2. Unification. Now, the next level up is unification. This is where you stop doing all the work yourself and you start coordinating other people. Think of managers, supervisors, leaders. You're still involved in the work, but now your value comes from organizing and guiding others. This is where leverage begins. You move from how much can I do to how much can I lead. And yes, this is better paid, but it still has limits. You're now responsible for more people, more output, more stress. If someone doesn't show up, it falls on you. If the team fails, it reflects on your leadership. You're no longer carrying just your weight, you're carrying the weight of a system. This level is better, but it's still tied to time and the energy of others. Your income depends on your ability to manage. And not everyone wants to carry that pressure. 3. Communication. This is where things start to shift big time. This is the level of people who use their words to create value. Speakers, writers, teachers, content creators, salespeople. This is where your ability to communicate clearly, persuasively, and powerfully becomes a skill that scales. Because here's what's different. Communication is not tied to time. I can say something once, and if it's recorded or shared, that same message can create income thousands of times. Think about that. A salesperson can sell a product once, and that's it. But a person who records a video explaining the product can sell it 100 times a day, even while sleeping. That's leverage, and that's the power of words. At this level, your income is based on your clarity, your message, your understanding of people, not just your hours. And this is where I started seeing big changes in my own life. When I started creating content online, using my voice, my story, my message, suddenly I wasn't tied to one person, one location, or one sale. I could reach hundreds, thousands, even without physically being there. That's when my audience grew. That's when I started getting orders even when I didn't post that day. That's when I realized I don't have to be everywhere. My message can go places I can't. This is why communication is powerful. It multiplies, it duplicates, it compounds. 4. Imagination. Now, the highest level of value is imagination. This is where true wealth is created. This is the level of visionaries, entrepreneurs, inventors, innovators. This is where people use their mind to create ideas that change the game. Think of Steve Jobs, Elon Musk, Walt Disney. But even in smaller ways, think of the person who starts a business in their kitchen and turns it into a brand. They started with an idea. Imagination is not just dreaming. It's seeing what's not yet visible and building it into reality. And here's why this is the most powerful level. Because imagination is unlimited. You can't run out of it. You don't need a degree to access it. You don't need permission to use it. And when your ideas solve problems, create movements, inspire people, that's the highest form of value. And it's also the most highly paid. Let me say this again. All value is not equal. And the higher you move up this ladder, the less your income is tied to time, and the more it's tied to impact. So instead of asking, how can I do more work? I started asking, how can I create higher value? I shifted from doing everything myself to finding ways to systemize, automate, and communicate with impact. I stopped trying to grind my way to freedom and started thinking, what do people need that I can give in a bigger way? I stopped thinking small and started imagining. And now, instead of working 12 hours for 500 pesos, I can speak for 1 hour and create 50,000 pesos worth of value. And here's what I want you to hear. This isn't about being special. This is about understanding where value actually lives. Most people stay stuck because they never leave the first level. They're told, work harder, when they should be asking, how can I level up? You don't escape poverty by doing more. You escape by thinking differently, by imagining differently, by speaking differently, by using your life as a platform for value, not just labor. So if you're making 10,000 a month and it feels like you're giving everything, it's not because you're lazy, it's because you're operating from the wrong level. Climb the ladder. Use your mind, use your message, use your imagination. That's how I moved from 10K months to 100K months. And now, you can too. The third big realization that changed my income completely was this. I finally understood what selling really is. And I know, just hearing the word selling might already make you uncomfortable. Because for most of my life, I misunderstood it too. I thought selling meant you had to convince people, that you had to push, that you had to sound smart or talk nonstop just to get someone to say yes. I used to think it was all about talking, and I'm not even a talkative person. So I thought maybe I'm just not built for business. But I was wrong. Selling is not about convincing. Selling is persuasion, and persuasion is not talking, it's listening. When I began to listen more than I spoke, I started seeing what people actually needed, what they were afraid of, what they were hoping for, what would help them. Selling is not about making someone buy. It's about understanding what they already want, and then positioning your product or service as the answer. That's when things started to click. I stopped trying to impress. I stopped trying to explain too much. I just listened. I listened to what people were complaining about. I paid attention to what they needed in their day-to-day life. I watched how they talked about their problems, and then I offered what I had in a way that made sense to them. Not a hard sell, just clarity, just connection, and it worked. But here's where it got even more powerful. We brought that understanding online. We didn't have a big team. We didn't have a fancy store. We didn't have a big budget, but we had a product that solved a real problem. And we had a message that was clear. So we went online and started offering it. At first it was slow, but then, little by little, orders started coming in. Not just from our town, not just from nearby cities, but from different parts of the country, people we never even met. And then something amazing happened. We woke up one morning with multiple orders already waiting for us. No calls, no face-to-face talks, no explanations. Just people who saw what we offered, felt it was the right solution, and ordered it while we were sleeping. That's when I realized selling doesn't need to be tied to effort every single time. It doesn't have to exhaust you. If you create a system, if you understand people, if your message is simple and your offer is real, selling becomes something that works for you without chasing anyone. This is the power of e-commerce. It expanded our reach. It removed the limits. It gave us access to more people without adding more hours. You don't need to be everywhere physically. You don't need to knock on every door. You just need to show up where people are already looking. And in today's world, they're looking online. And let me be honest, it wasn't easy at first. I had no background in online business. I didn't know what strategy to follow. But we were willing to learn. We were willing to try. Because I saw this. If we didn't adapt online, we'd stay stuck. If we didn't go digital, our growth would stay local. But the moment we shifted, the business shifted too. We had days when orders just came in on their own. We never ran out of customers. And we didn't even have to explain everything over and over again. We wrote it once, recorded it once, and that became our silent sales team. That's what I want you to understand. Selling is not just a skill. It's a doorway to reach more people, a doorway to freedom, a doorway to income that's not tied to time. You don't need to become someone else to sell. You just need to learn how to listen deeply and present clearly. Most people fail at selling because they try too hard to sound smart. They make things complicated. They think they need to be like someone else. But real selling? It's simple. It's human. It's just understanding what someone wants and showing them that you can help. That's what we did. We built a simple online system. We spoke directly to the people we wanted to serve. We delivered what we promised. And the result? More income, more time freedom, more peace. Because now we don't wait for customers. They come to us. They trust us. They refer others to us. And it all started with that one shift, learning what selling really is. So if you're someone who says, I don't know how to sell, I'm too shy, or that's not my personality, let me tell you, you don't need to be the loudest. You just need to be the most honest, the most attentive, the most committed to actually solving real problems. Because people are not looking for noise. They're looking for someone they can trust. Be that person. And in today's world, use the internet to multiply your voice. You don't need a big budget. You don't need a perfect strategy. You just need to start. Start where you are. Offer what you have. Talk to people like they matter, because they do. That's what real selling looks like. And when you learn how to sell, you never have to beg. You never have to chase. You simply connect, and the right people will respond. This is how we grew our business. This is how we serve more people. This is how we get orders, even in our sleep. Not because we're special, but because we decided to understand people and to help them one solution at a time.